2030.
Saudi Arabia, the public investment fund,
It's a
there's
big
a lot of
vision.
excitement
This
around
transformational
NEOM specifically.
change. Every aspect of the kingdom, economic, social, cultural, religious.
The 2030.
This is the 2030.
Yalla.
This is the 2030. We are in episode 5. Hello, Hannah. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing well.
You doing
feeling
better?
I'm doing better, yes. Had a little stint in the hospital this last week, 5 days actually, as well as my son. A lot of days in isolation, kind of scary, but everything's okay. Good to be back here with you. Still have both hands, which was a little bit of a concern. So I'm back to playing golf, hopefully in the next few weeks. Thank you for asking. It was a little weird.
Salama.
Thank you. We can't make, by the way, we need to, that can't be the Arabic word. We can do 2 this week, if that's okay, because I already know what that means as it has been relayed to me. But yeah, thank you very much for saying that. Everything's cool back home now and headed back into Saudi Arabia next week. So with all my fingers and hands, which is great.
Excellent. It's easier to maybe like pull your suitcase when you have all of your fingers. I don't know.
Yeah,
does it affect
there's
that?
a lot of things that are easier to do with all your fingers in both hands for sure. As you know, we talked about it. I was going to go with a hook hand if that was going to be the result. So, nice little cork at the end and, terrifying the local children, I think would be kind of cool. And
Did
funny.
you ever watch Arrested Development?
Yes, I did.
Didn't like Buster have a claw hand? Like it was a hook, but it like also, anyway. Maybe that would be that's a bad idea. Like, why do people use hooks? I also think of Happy Gilmore. Why hooks instead of like something else, like just like a glove?
That's a really great question. I have no idea, but I assume it goes back to piracy times. But even then, the question is like, what service does a hook provide? Like, why not just a knife with a sheath on it? That's a good question. If any listeners and viewers have any insight into the origin of hook hands, that could be very interesting. But yeah, it doesn't seem very functional. Like what would you even do with a hook? I mean, like try to pull stuff? Yeah. This was sent in from listener and 2030 spiritual patron Abdul, my friend, after listening to the last episode. Buddy, this is for you and Hannah based on the last episode, and it's a link to NACROA.com, which is the North American Camel Ranch Owners Association. I think this was just meant for him to say that, FYI, there are camels in North America. I mean, I know there are camels, but they're not like wandering around, like they are in Saudi Arabia. But yeah, so this was
they're not really wandering. I mean, like camels are always kind of with their herder in Saudi as well. I get what you mean. Okay. It's not like you're not going to be driving and like maybe hit a camel in the US. You might hit a deer, but you're not going to hit a camel. Versus in Saudi, right? In Saudi, you would hit a camel, not a deer, usually, if you're going to drive and hit some large animal crossing the street.
Right. So, and those most of the time, right, are with herders, but there are still wild camels, right? Or are they kind of just like wandering away from the herd and they're all spoken for?
Yeah, wandering away. No, I don't think there's just like wild camels.
Okay.
I don't think so.
Okay. And is hitting camels on accident with your car like common? Because I know it's like a cause of death in the US
terrifying.
with deer.
Yeah. Same.
Okay. So that's the thing. Anyway, so the North American Camel Ranch Owners Association gets a shout out really early on here. Hannah, let's get to the deep dive. What do you think?
Let's do the deep dive. Right. So my deep dive today begins with adding my voice to the outpouring of deep condolences to the family of Prince Badr bin Abdul Mohsen, who died on May 4th. And really, it's actually condolences to the Saudi people and anyone, actually, everybody whose lives he's touched. He was a renowned poet, nicknamed as the Architect of Words. So he was the president of the Saudi Society for Culture and Arts since 1973. He was only 75 when he died in Paris after battling cancer. He was an intellectual and he had a deep-seated love for literature and poetry. Poetry, I think it's important to say the reason why people are very sad that he has passed away is that poetry plays a very, very big role in many people's lives in the Arab world and in Saudi Arabia. And Prince Badr bin Abdul Mohsen poems really have been turned into some of the most impactful and famous songs by famous composers and the leading Arabic singers of the contemporary times. So Saudi singers such as Muhammad Abdul, Talal Maddah, but Emirati singer like Ahlam, Kuwaiti singer Nawal, Iraqi Kadhim al-Sahir, Sabir Rabai from Tunisia, Asala from Syria, Lebanese Najwa Karam, and so many more people have sung his poems. So he really speaks to kind of the Arab world as a whole. And he had this incredible ability to just I'm actually kind of tearing up a little bit, but he had this incredible ability to kind of craft poetry that articulated the emotions of love and longing and feelings in such a talented manner. He was very eloquent, and his eloquence kind of just encapsulates the experiences of, love and reflection. And he was very, very thoughtful. And I was speaking today to a friend and colleague. She's a CEO at Green Space, and her name is Dr. Rima Turki. And she was telling me that she was in tears. And I just kind of wanted to actually quote the beautiful tribute that she wrote to him on LinkedIn. As we bid farewell to a soul who was not just a cloud in our lives, but also a thread woven into the fabric of our nation, I find myself grappling with the question. I extend my condolences to your loved ones, to our country, or to my own youth and formative years. The loss of a prince and a poet who left an indelible mark on our culture and identity is a void that cannot be measured. His influence on our culture is immeasurable. His ideas have shaped our emotions, thoughts, and expressions. As we grieve his departure, let us also celebrate the legacy he has left behind. In honoring his memory, we pledge to keep creativity alive, a testament to the profound impact he had on our lives. Your departure has stirred many emotions within us, joy, sadness, and loss. Yet, like a gentle breeze, your words will continue whispering in our ears, reminding us to cherish our hometown, poetry, and love. Our Prince, may you rest in peace. You taught us love and hatred. We will honor you by breathing your poetry and loving our country. End quote. So I think, her tribute really does encapsulate kind of what so many people are feeling in his loss. He was awarded or honored by UNESCO in 2019 on World Poetry Day in a Paris ceremony where he recited a suite of his poetry speaking at the ceremony. And the UNESCO Director General, Audrey Azoulay, praised him for his humane message. And I was going to quote him as well. Every form of poetry is unique, but each reflects the universal of the human experience, the aspiration for creativity that crosses all boundaries and borders of time, as well as space in the constant affirmation of humanity as a single family. That's the power of poetry, she said. So only some of his work has actually been translated into English, including a selection that was published by Ithra in Aramco in 2021. But one of his most kind of famous poems was sung by the phenomenal Abdurrab Idris, which is called Leila. So we'll have a link to this and some more of his sung poetry and music in the show notes for people to listen to it. But I will say, just as a final note on that, is that, I think, again, the theme that we've talked about a little bit throughout the podcast is that there's a human side to everybody in Saudi that people don't see as often. And, all of our songs are about love and pain and suffering and boundaries. And he was really, really good at articulating that. And so he is kind of the voice of the formative years of a lot of young Saudis. So may he rest in peace.
Rest in peace. Very well done, Hanaa. I mean, you asked me earlier today if I had heard of Prince Badr, and I had not. And so in advance of speaking with you today, I read a bunch about him. And, it's really moving when you study somebody's life who has impacted so many other people and who had so much influence because of his mind and because of his thoughts and because of his sort of presence in his poetry. And you mentioned that at least one piece has been translated in English, and found that. I thought it was really interesting, too, just looking into his life. Some things sort of stood out to me, as a parent of two very young children, sort of reading about how he was formed as a poet and an artist. And there's some quotes here I want to read. Quote, raised in an environment rich in scholarly pursuits and literary appreciation, Prince Badr was nurtured in a household where his father's passion for science and literature was evident. You mentioned he was honored in 2019. I think he was also honored by King Salman,
He was, yes.
bestowed upon him the prestigious King Abdulaziz scarf. And there's just so much about him that describes how he was sort of a sponge for literature and ideas and poetry and loved being around intellectuals, writers, thinkers. They described where he was usually doing a lot of his work, which is surrounded by a wealth of books, personal library, deep-seated love for literature and poetry. It's cool. Death is always sad, but souls never die. And it's cool to see a soul that lives on in so many other people and will for a long time.
Yeah, it is definitely sad, but there's so much love and outpouring. And I was listening to a few different people speak on different, just on the news and report to reporters about their experiences knowing him and kind of engaging with his work. And everybody's really been in tears. And there's this tradition in Saudi of having, kind of big shows of actually the poet just sitting on stage reading poetry to a huge audience, just poem after poem. And this is something that people do attend, longing to listen to these renowned figures just reciting their own poetry, not sung, just spoken, because there's also an art to reciting it. And I think, listening to him recite the poems sometimes is more touching than listening to the songs that have been turned, the poetry has been turned into. But I think that because of the music, it's been something that has touched more people's lives, because that's not necessarily a tradition outside of Saudi Arabia. So it's wonderful to know that his legacy will live on.
We've mentioned on the show before that 2024 is the year of the camel. 2023 in Saudi Arabia was the year of Arabic poetry. And this is, as you mentioned, something that's very important to Saudis and is not being exported really and translated broadly in English. Poetry rarely translates well from language to language because it really speaks to, it's unique in its own language. So sometimes it does, a lot of times it doesn't. And so that's what's so interesting about this. And I think why it's great that you did this tribute, and this very timely tribute, because this is all something that's new to me and would therefore be new to many in the West. And I think it's really touching. And rest in peace, and thoughts with his family, his children, all of his relatives, and all Saudis.
And just a little shout out to my husband, Aziz, who used to organize these poetry nights at his school when he was in high school. And he got the tradition really going in the school for people to write poetry and recite. And they didn't write their own. A lot of times they would recite other people's, and sometimes they would write their own. But it was this way to kind of engage young people in the art of writing poetry, telling and speaking it and reciting it. And I think that, as a last note, I am excited when Saudi Ministry of Culture name a year after a tradition that is so deep-seated, because it really does show how we can take that and turn it into something that young people really engage in and admire and appreciate and take to the next level. And I think that, when somebody like this dies, maybe younger Saudis don't know his work as well, and now they will, because he's going to be present in the news, and they have these opportunities from the Ministry of Culture to now be more engaged with these things. So that makes me happy as well.
Yeah, that's really cool that Aziz did that. My parents really liked poetry, especially my mom, and she used to pay me $5 for every poem that I memorized as a kid. She gave me a book of poems. Yeah, I know. Yeah, so it's weird because like you do that and you're like, cool, like got $5 or whatever. And then over time you like hear parts of the poem somewhere and you're like, wait, I know that. And then it comes into your brain, and then poetry sticks, like it really sticks in your brain. And so like somebody will say part of a poem and I'll just immediately say the rest of it. This is good that we're doing this sort of tribute, because it's worth it and it's worth highlighting. So well done.
Thank you. So let's get to the news. Dubai's unveiled a $35 billion plan to create the largest airport in the world out of the Emirates' second largest airfield. So the massive project is going to enable the airport to surpass and eventually replace the existing Dubai International Airport, currently the busiest in the world for international traffic, a title it has held for a full decade.
Sort of amazing, right? Because the Dubai airport seems really new and modern to me. I know it's not that new. It does handle the most international air traffic in the world. But this is the Al Maktoum International Airport, which is now a smaller airport, and they want to make it the world's largest. I guess this is cool. This blew up my social media. I'm sure it did for you as well. I guess the question is it going to be bigger than the really awesome looking Riyadh airport that is being planned? I mean, is there a size contest going on here? Kind of interesting, but does look cool.
Yeah. Isn't there always a little bit of one between, I don't know, the Gulf states? Everybody kind of wants to have the shiniest, newest, and biggest.
Yeah, which is interesting because if they're like number 1 and 2, does that really affect like which I would choose to fly through? For me, it would just be like pricing of the flights. And then, I don't know enough about this. We have talked about airline stuff in the past, and I love airlines, or at least am interested in things related to airlines. But yeah, I mean, so it looks like Qatar is going to be blown away by this. No one's going through Doha anymore. It's just going to be Riyadh and Dubai duking it out. 70 square kilometers. That's huge. 400 aircraft gates, also huge. 5 parallel runways. 12 million tons of cargo annually. That's insane. And 2035, it looks like completion date. Do I have that right? $35 billion, you said. Oh my God.
Yeah, I mean, it's also Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid, the VP and ruler of Dubai, posted on X to say that once complete, Al Maktoum International Airport will have the world's largest capacity, serving up to 260 million passengers a year. So
that's insane. Currently, the population of the world is what? 8 billion. So that's like 6% of everybody is going through this airport every year. That's that blows me away.
Well,
and I wonder,
they have some repeats, right?
I guess they could have some repeats, right? That's a good point. So maybe like 5 or 4. How many times do you fly through Dubai in a year?
Well, see, that's the thing. Like what you said, it's about the convenience, the price, it's the convenience. But if you have the capacity, then you might, when you're looking for flights and transfers, that's going to look the most attractive, right? Because you're going to maybe find a faster transfer, more options, less waiting time between your connection, and better duty free for your luxury shopping.
Yeah, I had to fly through Dubai a few months ago. I had stuff to do in Dubai, and then I was going to Geneva. So I flew through from Riyadh to Dubai, and the Emirates lounge at Dubai airport is like the coolest thing ever. Definitely the nicest lounge I've seen. Really awesome. Have you noticed that now they're starting to put golf simulators in lounges, which is super. Maybe you're not looking for them.
I haven't noticed.
You haven't noticed. Okay, cool. But yeah, that's a pretty sweet lounge and situation. Good for them, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I think so. Emirates too. Like, one of the things if you book business class, you get that concierge service, a chauffeur service. They'll come pick you up. It's great, lovely cars. There are these perks, right? So when the airline's doing it well, and then that's where they're based, you might then look, I could either go Finnair or I could go Emirates. I'd rather transfer through Dubai because look at this incredible. So I'm thinking, I was like looking at a ticket to go to Singapore, and I was thinking about that. At the end of the day, I actually went with the one that's going to give me airline mileage instead. So I think you also need to think about that. There are so many factors that influence why people will pick one airline instead of another.
So doesn't it, and maybe I have this wrong, but it looks like this is way farther out, away from, it's closer to Jebel Ali, and like it's not, Dubai International is like almost like closer to the downtown Dubai and closer to Sharjah. Yeah. Well, and what's going to happen? I know they said that this is going to be the largest airport, but like, what about the other airport? They're not going to like shut it down or dismantle it, right? I mean, I don't know.
That's a good question. I mean, I don't know. I wonder the same with Riyadh as well. I wonder what's going to happen there.
Well, they're sort of like replacing the airport, right? Whereas this is like we've got another airport out there. Like, wait, maybe this is going to be like Reagan and Dulles in DC, where it's like, I don't know, but Reagan being my vast preference, although Dulles is good, just the drive-in. But anyway, Good for them. This was long rumored as well, and there was, I think, a couple false starts maybe. So maybe it's actually going to happen now. Who knows?
Inshallah.
Anyway, inshallah. Moving on. BlackRock and Saudi Arabia's sovereign wealth fund have agreed to establish a new multi-asset investment firm based in Riyadh. This is according to the Wall Street Journal, which has been right on top of this all the last couple of weeks. The new entity will be called BlackRock Riyadh Investment Management, BRIM, and will invest across a range of asset classes, starting with an anchor investment of up to $5 billion from the PIF. BlackRock said Tuesday. That's a lot of money.
Yeah, and according to the report, the strategies will be managed by a Riyadh-based team of investors. But BlackRock and the PIF are seeking to accelerate the growth of capital markets in Saudi by supporting foreign institutional investment in the country.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, this is like a big get for Saudi Arabia. BlackRock, 9 trillion AUM. I mean, they're huge. They're like a brand name.
Yeah.
This is kind of a big deal, right? I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, I do think it's a big deal. There's also a quote from Larry Fink, the CEO, the chief executive, if you will, of BlackRock. We're excited to build on the deep partnership we've developed with PIF for many years to launch this first of its kind international investment management platform in Saudi Arabia. Fink was in Riyadh on Monday speaking at the World Economic Forum meeting, and I think so much came out of that. So I think there's a lot of big deals that are happening off the back of those meetings. There were so many people in Riyadh at the time. So yeah, I do think it's a big deal. I mean, it's more your area than mine. So
it's just this like now banks, PE funds, people are just like rushing to Saudi Arabia, but you didn't have a ton of the blue chips going there necessarily until more recently. I mean, obviously this is among the bluest blood of the blue chips, but then you also had another story from Bloomberg of other banks and other funds rushing in. You have Deutsche Bank AG ramping up headcount in Saudi Arabia. I don't know what really caused the pot to boil over, but now banks are just rushing to Riyadh to set up and to get in on the action. So really good news for Saudi Arabia. And it's going to be interesting to see how those banks play with other local banks in Riyadh and across Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
Will there be some M&A activity? Probably. Or JVs or whatever. It is going to be interesting. Pretty cool.
What does that mean really for the local banking sector? I mean, because I don't know, as a consumer banker, I find that banking in Saudi is incredibly easy. It's actually better than in the US or here in the UK for me. Everything is digitally connected. Everything is really easy. So that's just thinking about whatever, my savings and my checking accounts, right? And just being able to access, being able to transfer money, being able to do things. It's really quick. It's really easy. The security is top notch. I just find it to be so incredibly easy. So do companies experience that with these corporate banks coming in at the same time? Or will it add extra layers of security that are going to make things more complicated for funding big projects? I wonder.
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think there's interesting questions about access to wealth management services that these banks provide and usually make money off of. That it is interesting. You know what? We should get a banking and finance expert on the show in the coming weeks. I think we can manage that. And I think that'd be really cool to sort of have some of these questions answered, because this is a little bit disruptive to the banking sector in a way that fintech might be, where you just have all this new technology and new players coming in. And it's like, okay, but to your question, like as a consumer, what does that mean? I've got my bank. Do I want to switch to another bank? What's the upside? Like, why would I do that? Yeah.
Or will it affect me as a consumer at all anyway? Or are we talking about, corporate
companies,
banking here only? Or are we talking about, and so, those are kind of the questions that I have when I hear about things like this. I mean, nobody has like a BlackRock, like checking account, right? That's not a thing.
You don't? I think, they're not really a bank. They're a fund,
No.
But then you have like Morgan Stanley has many services.
But then you were also saying how Deutsche Bank is ramping up headcount in the
sure
in Saudi and things.
I think project financing too is a thing that this is going to matter for, because you'll have these banks sort of be like, oh, we'll loan you the money to develop this or that, or whatever. So Anyway, we're a little over our skis here on the banking stuff. It's maybe a little more my
I
sector, but
happen
not
to
my
know
sector. So,
somebody
yeah.
or live with somebody that knows a lot about this, so we can maybe
Well,
have him come on.
an in-house guest that is an expert on this. Sounds like a good idea.
Yeah.
Would love that.
But also
yeah.
maybe somebody from a local bank in Saudi as well, who we could ask a little bit more about how they feel about these new entities coming into the kingdom, into the space.
Indeed. We're going to do more on BlackRock, right? For the next item. This is yours to read?
Yeah, I think so. So BlackRock is set to host a gathering of top corporate executives and government officials in Riyadh, marking the U.S. firm's first event on this scale in the Saudi capital and bolstering the kingdom's efforts to lure foreign investment. This is according to Bloomberg. So the U.S. firm is hosting the event alongside the Saudi Ministry of Finance, according to people familiar with the matter, who asked not to be identified, discussing private information.
Yeah, I mean, we just talked about BlackRock's involvement, but like, it is no small thing for Larry Fink to be like, I'm going to Riyadh and we're going to do all this stuff and we're setting up. And this is the type of thing that in 2017, 2018 was not happening and now is happening. There's enough proof of concept on the ground in Saudi Arabia for this type of activity to be taking place. This article had some really interesting nuggets, one of which was that Larry Fink has had at least 2 private dinners with MBS, His Royal Highness the Crown Prince. So, I mean, obviously, the Crown Prince, Yasser Al Rumayyan, sort of the big decision makers in Saudi Arabia are saying, hey, like, we need BlackRock. BlackRock would be tremendous proof of concept for the sector here. And I believe that there is already a PIF BlackRock fund for infrastructure as well. I could have that wrong. Somebody's going to, we'll hear from people being like, that's wrong. But anyway, yeah. So I think that's true. I'm not going to look it up right now. But anyway, this is cool.
Okay.
Good story for Saudi.
Yeah, definitely.
So moving on, a lot on BlackRock. Let's go to Riyadh. Saudi Arabia's capital is set to pull back on its target to double its population by 2030 as it reconfigures plans. This is again according to Bloomberg, which is in fuego at the moment on Saudi coverage, as it always is. Matthew Martin, really good reporter, right on top of things there. Riyadh is eyeing 10 million residents by the start of the next decade. The Royal Commission for Riyadh City said the current goal stands at 15 million. They're going to scale that back to 10.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is great news for those who are living in Riyadh now that are feeling that maybe the infrastructure needs time to really accommodate the city's fast growth, including, traffic as one thing, but other facilities as well. Riyadh's population is estimated to grow by 1.8% this year to reach more than 7.8 million people and cross 8.5 million in 2030. I mean, I'm very familiar with RCRC, the Royal Commission for Riyadh City, and their plans. And I think they're doing incredible work to make Riyadh as attractive as possible and as comfortable and accommodating as possible. And so what this sounds like to me is, basically we want everybody to be comfortable. And if that means revising targets, if that means changing things or, just reconfiguring the way we work on developing the city, then that's fine because we want it to be the most comfortable and the best version of the city as it possibly can be.
Just really, really well said. I mean, like we talk about this as a theme of the show. You have the vision, you have goals, and then you have adjustment of goals and adjustment of things to reality. It's like the quote about realism, right? It's like realism is adjusting the sails for the wind. It takes you where you need to go. And I mean, to me, this is the type of thing that you would see all the time in a Western, news organization or paper or news site where it's, the headline is Saudi Arabia is scaling back its plans. And it's like, no, it's adjusting its plans. There are other ways in which it has totally blown away, even the goals that were thought to be lofty, like tourism. Yeah. So this is just a realistic decision. And I think this is cool for that reason. So yeah, cool.
Realistic, but also I think more important than that, I think it is taking more important than it just being realistic, it is taking into consideration what people want as well. And, they're listening. And I think that's really important.
I want less traffic in Riyadh, but I didn't know that's not just like something you snap your fingers and get. traffic in DC near where I live is as horrible as it is today as it was when I was growing up. And it's just a reality of a big city. So I'm not really
Yeah.
complaining, but yeah. Anyway.
Right. So this is a topic I think that makes you really happy. So Chinese on-demand local services giant Meituan plans to launch its international food delivery platform in Saudi Arabia's capital, marking the company's first overseas expansion amid slowing growth in China. So Beijing-based Meituan is working to debut its Kita app in the Middle East with Riyadh as its first stop.
I'm just I'm so stoked to hear somebody else mispronounce things because that's all I do.
How do you pronounce it?
I don't know.
Do you
I don't know.
speak Mandarin?
I don't. But I'm just laughing because you probably got it right, but maybe you didn't.
No,
Either way,
probably not.
That's like me trying to pronounce Arabic names, and I'm always just like right before I say them. Anyway, you're right. I do love this because I love food and I love delivery. I don't love China and Saudi Arabia's whirlwind romance that it seems to be developing in everywhere you look. I'm super interested in this specifically because I think that food delivery in Saudi Arabia is one of the more mature tech spaces, especially if you're looking at it from a VC standpoint. I mean, you can't really even get into the market now because the market is saturated and it's awesome. Like I only used Hunger Station when I was living there from January to April. And we'll only use Hunger Station going forward because I never had one problem with it. And it was always so fast. So there's just no reason to go to a competitor. But there were, and there are other competitors. You have Jahez, Chefs, others. And then you had like American companies that tried to enter into it because everyone's doing it. And, labor is less expensive there for the delivery drivers. So it's like Uber Eats failed because it wasn't a local company. So I don't know. I don't know how are they going to compete here? But they certainly think that they can.
So it's really interesting. I mean, I know it's quite developed. And just a shout out to the Eastern Province here because that's where Hunger Station was founded.
Made in Al-Khobar.
Khobar even. Yes. But, as far as I understand it, these companies are not necessarily that profitable, right? Like, I think that there are issues with food delivery. So it depends on where you are in the world. And are we just really lazy? Like, why can't we just go get our food on our own or cook more? I'm sorry. I love food delivery and I get it a lot here. But I do feel like if it wasn't available, I probably would eat more healthy food. And I think we have issues with with our relationship with food in general globally because of things like this. So this doesn't make me very happy. I want people to cook their own food, control their portions, control their ingredients, eat more locally inspired food, get in touch with their culture, their heritage. That's how I feel about it.
I just want to make a point about food delivery. First of all, it doesn't exist where I live in the US. I live in kind of a shore, Hamptons-like community outside of DC. So it's pretty remote. I'm on a farm. So it's like there is no food delivery. So when my family was in Riyadh for the winter, oh my gosh, every single day, food delivery. And for us, access to things like Yemeni foods and Bahraini foods, and also, Lebanese and other types of cuisines that just do not exist, delivery, non-delivery out here in St. Michael's, Maryland. It was just an absolute pleasure. And I didn't cook a single thing in Riyadh, not one thing over 4 months, but I love cooking. I mean, I love it. And it's a huge thing that I like doing with my family and my parents and everybody. Like I love to cook. But I also love food delivery, and I will not besmirch the name of these wonderful apps that made my life absolutely delightful when living there.
Yeah, actually, when I do go to Seattle in the summers, the food delivery is awful. It takes forever. Here, I can actually order something like, I don't know, I had food delivery today, and I got Chipotle, and it came in 7 minutes.
So you're bashing food delivery. You're saying we should all eat healthier, and yet here you are, just a few hours ago.
I drove for 4 hours today. It was 3.5 plus stop to fill up gas. And so when I got back, I did not feel like cooking every now and then, I think. And the only thing available on my drive was McDonald's or KFC. So I felt like I deserved, burrito bowl.
Always a mistake to eat KFC or McDonald's or any fast food on a long drive, because as soon as you eat it, you're like, that was not a good idea. Now I feel bad.
Well, the Arabic word today is related to something that you've recently gone through, just to make sure if you ever need to go to the hospital and you find yourself in an Arabic speaking country and somebody that doesn't speak English, you'd want to tell them that you need to go to mustashfa. Mustashfa, like a mustache and FA at the end. I really hope you don't have to go to the hospital again, but you could also just say diktor, which means doctor. And labib is it in Arabic, but diktor, people know that you need to go see a doctor, and they would find them in the mustashfa, and so that'd be okay. And by the way, we say mustashfa in Saudi, but in other Arabic-speaking countries, you might say meshfa. So there's different ways of saying it, but like mustashfa.
Hanaa, thank you very much.
Thank you.